Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good
Morning.
morning, Madam Secretary. We
Morning.
appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's hearing where we will be examining and discussing the Department of Commerce's fiscal year 2025 budget request. I want to thank Secretary Raimondo for appearing before us. I look forward to conducting important congressional oversight of this agency as we look to fund ways to strengthen our economy and compete on the global stage. This committee has been active on both fronts. Last month, the House passed H.R. 6571, the Promoting Resilient Supply Chain Act, led by Representatives Bouchon and Blunt-Rochester, which would establish a mapping program at the Department of Commerce to examine our supply chains to better prepare our economy for any future shocks that we may see. Monitoring these trends will help protect us from reliance on our nation's enemies and instead help industries to adapt quickly. The department would also be tasked with partnering with the private sector to better understand the vulnerabilities in our supply chains, including supply chains for emerging technologies, and provide recommendations for promoting emerging technologies and making critical supply chains more resilient and closer to home. Secretary Raimondo, again, thank you for being here before us to discuss these issues. I'm interested to hear from you on these supply chain issues, as well as the state of our country's global competition with China and the status of our travel and tourism sector. Last Congress, we worked on a bipartisan basis with Representative Schakowsky, our ranking member, to pass the Restoring Brand USA Act and the Visit America Act to ensure the U.S. remains a top destination for visitors around the globe and that we have oversight mechanisms and a plan in place at Commerce to prepare the nation for the next decade in travel and tourism trends. I'm concerned that the U.S. is starting to lag behind other top nations in the travel sector, unfortunately, and I look forward to discussing ways to modernize and advance our nation's tourism priorities through your department by reducing red tape and bureaucratic barriers and instead embrace the power of our private sector and our great local economies. Lastly, I hope to be able to discuss the continued importance of American leadership in emerging technologies such as blockchain, AI, and quantum computing. Our subcommittee has again conducted bipartisan work on these topics, including passing H.R. 6571, the Deploying American Blockchains Act, in May, which will direct the Department of Commerce to take action in promoting U.S. competitiveness and the deployment and use of blockchain technologies. We cannot cede American leadership in these fields. I know you know that, and it is critical that we continue to employ new strategies that let innovators thrive here in the United States. That also includes the critical infrastructure manufacturing necessary to develop these emerging technologies. Representative Miller Meeks's bill that we passed would do just that by finding pathways to increase our capacity for domestic manufacturing, reducing barriers to entry, and becoming less reliant on countries like China for critical components necessary for these innovations to continue. With all of these pieces of legislation, I hope we can get those passed. We've got to get it past the Senate and across the finish line to the President's desk. Secretary Raimondo, I look forward to hearing from you about how we can align these goals, secure American leadership, reduce red tape for industry stakeholders. We cannot let a top-down approach get in the way, and hope that we can instead let the American innovative economy thrive. The budget needs to reflect these key priorities without breaking the bank, and I'm interested to hear your perspective. So with that, I'll yield back, and I will recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, the ranking member of the subcommittee, Ms. Schakowsky, for her 5 minutes, her opening statement. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it is really an honor and a pleasure for me to welcome Secretary Raimondo to our subcommittee today. I really look forward to hearing what you have to say. I want to start with just a thank you. You have been to my district and to the Chicago area a number of times. I know you are traveling as well to hear from people, from workers, from manufacturers, about what needs to be done. And the fact that you are out there is so very, very important. I appreciate it so much. And I also just want to compliment you on the incredible work that I think the Department of Commerce is doing right now. Let me just list a couple of the things that are so incredibly important. We are looking at the issues of, let me get my list here. We're talking about tourism. We are all interested in being promoted and the work that you're doing there. In the supply chain, which you have done great work in making sure that it is more resilient. Artificial intelligence, making it safer and more reliable, and high-speed internet for all, which is certainly a priority of all of ours. So I want to thank you so much for those important things. I think that it will lower the cost for consumers and be good for our economy. And then, of course, I want to mention the 800,000 manufacturing jobs. This is such a remarkable advance, and that is probably one of the most important things that I want to highlight. I did want to, let's see, what is that? I wanted to say I'm very disappointed that the Republicans have suggested that in the light of all the success, that they actually want to diminish your budget. And we are looking at a recommendation of a 9% decrease in the budget. We really can't afford to do that. And I am disappointed that that is on the table, especially since they're asking you to do more and more and more. Can't do it without the money that is so desperately needed to make it happen. I did want to mention one issue that has been raised to me by some of my friends and your friends also in labor, who have been concerned that when it comes to the chips workers, and I'll ask you a question about that, that they are not getting what they need right now, they say, in the way of safety, in the way of wages, in the way of the hours that they are asked to spend in dangerous situations. So I will want to talk a bit about that when we get to the Q&A. But overall, I just want to thank you for all of your tireless efforts to make sure that we are advancing our economy and doing the kinds of things that we need to create the jobs that we need in our country right now. And I want to thank you so much for that. And with that, I'm just going to yield back.
I thank the ranking member, and now I'll recognize the chair of the full committee, Mrs. Rogers, for 5 minutes for her opening statement.
Thank you, Chair Bilirakis. I appreciate your continued leadership on so many issues important to this committee, many of which touch the Department of Commerce, like tourism and travel. And welcome back, Secretary Raimondo. We appreciate you being here and your cooperation with the committee as we work to ensure America's continued economic and technological leadership. This committee plays a vital role in preserving and bolstering that leadership, which is currently being threatened by countries like China. It's critical that we work together to ensure that America is setting the rules of the road for the technologies of tomorrow. In part, that requires that we make sure these technologies are developed here in the U.S. in an ecosystem that promotes America's values. As you know, this committee has a rich history of bipartisanship, and we've worked this Congress and past Congresses to advance U.S. priorities domestically and internationally. Your department plays a key role in implementing the policies we advance, from improving data privacy to strengthening supply chains to helping build emerging technologies. Those efforts are essential as we work towards our shared goals of winning the future and beating China. Tomorrow, this committee will mark up the American Privacy Rights Act. This bipartisan legislation will not only give Americans the right to privacy and control over their data, but it will also benefit the Department of Commerce when representing American business interests on the world stage. According to the most recent data from the International Association of Privacy Professionals, almost 80% of developed countries have some form of comprehensive data privacy on the books, with one very notable exception, the U.S. This lack of comprehensive privacy protections puts us at a competitive disadvantage and prevents us from clearly articulating how to balance personal rights with promoting innovation. That's especially true when dealing with allies in the European Union, who can disproportionately influence outcomes through GDPR and other laws. These overly burdensome foreign regulations hamper innovation at the expense of Americans. Passing APRA will send a clear message to the world that we are serious about protecting our data and provides the opportunity to put our imprint on future international laws, like rules on cross-border data flow. If we fail to do this, adversaries will fill the void and weaken our leadership ability, as well as leave Americans' information open to exploitation from them. Getting APRA across the finish line is also essential to our shared goal of cementing U.S. leadership in artificial intelligence. Your goals to promote cutting-edge semiconductor technology through the CHIPS program, as well as your efforts to promote AI safety, are not mutually exclusive. We need to ensure America is leading both in semiconductor and AI technology development. And that means fostering a healthy business environment, securing our supply chains, and streamlining, rather than restricting, permitting, to secure the domestic supply chain of critical materials necessary for these technologies. Otherwise, we will cede our leadership in AI and other technologies of the future to China and others. Money and mandates are not enough. We must have an approach that fosters the culture of ingenuity and entrepreneurship America needs to move our country forward. This subcommittee has worked on several important solutions this past Congress that Chair Bilirakis alluded to, and I hope that we can continue to move these priorities forward to improve the deployment of emerging technologies, encourage foreign investment into American companies, streamline permitting for our critical supply chains, and enhance our nation's cybersecurity. We look forward to working with you on these efforts and continuing to build on the economic legacy that has made this country great. Look forward to hearing your testimony, Madam Secretary, and I yield back.
I thank the chair and now recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to welcome Secretary Raimondo back to the committee and commend her on her tremendous leadership in growing the American economy for the future and implementing the historic CHIPS and Science Act. And I really believe that, I see you as the main person in this administration trying to improve our supply chain and, leading the competitive battle against Beijing, if you will. And this law, of course, the CHIPS and Science Act, was enacted last Congress by President Biden and a Democratic Congress to bolster our economy, lower costs for consumers, create good-paying American jobs, and end our dangerous dependence on foreign manufacturers of critical goods, and I know how hard you fought to get this bill signed into law and passed at Congress. So the CHIPS and Science Act strengthens American manufacturing supply chain and national security by investing in research and development, science and technology, and the workforce of the future. Congress allocated $52.7 billion to the Department of Commerce to spur American semiconductor research, development, and fabrication in the United States. For almost 2 years now, Commerce has been busy implementing this law. To date, the Secretary and the Department has announced more than $29 billion in grant awards and more than $25 billion in loans and loan guarantees to 19 projects in 12 states. These projects are projected to catalyze $348 billion of total investment and create more than 100,000 good-paying jobs, manufacturing construction jobs, I should say. And that's what success looks like. So thank you, really. I want to thank you. And this surge of investment in American semiconductor research and fabrication is going to help restore American technological leadership in chip production and strengthen this vital supply chain. It will ensure more semiconductors are produced here in the United States and not China, but only one Republican, I should point out, on this committee supported this legislation, unfortunately. When the COVID-19 public health emergency exposed serious vulnerabilities in our critical manufacturing supply chain, Commerce spearheaded the national response to the crisis. The agency launched a first-of-its-kind supply chain center that serves as the analytic engine for supply chain resilience within the federal government. Bipartisan supply chain legislation, led by Representatives Blunt Rochester, Kelly Dingell, Wild, and Bouchon, that passed the House in May, out of this committee too, would further supplement Commerce's supply chain efforts. And the Biden administration has also strengthened export controls on key technologies that could potentially support the military of countries of concern to our national security. The department is tasked with administering a so-called entity list, which imposes export restrictions on entities that can harm our national security. And since President Biden took office, the department has added 318 entities from the People's Republic of China to this list, more than any other administration. So the Commerce Department is also championing efforts to strengthen America's travel and tourism industry. I care a lot about it because I'm at the Jersey Shore. Commerce has released a national travel and tourism strategy, which sets a 5-year goal of attracting 90 million international visitors who would spend an estimated $279 billion annually by 2027. Beaches in my congressional district are going to benefit from that. And I'm confident that Commerce will meet this ambitious goal. The department is also playing a crucial role in our continued efforts to ensure every American has access to high-speed, affordable internet. President Biden and congressional Democrats delivered with a bipartisan infrastructure law, and that allocated nearly $60 billion to broadband programs operated by NTIA within the Commerce Department. And the agency is working closely with all 50 states and the territories to get affordable, high-speed internet to all Americans. I also wanted to mention the department's helping build our nation's capacity to evaluate and mitigate the risks of AI. And this is going to help ensure safety, security, and trust while promoting an innovative, competitive AI ecosystem. Now, all of this work needs money. It's already been mentioned by my colleague from Illinois that unfortunately, Republican House appropriators have publicly pledged to cut non-defense programs by 6%. The initial allocation for Commerce, Justice, and related appropriations bill is over $4 billion less than funding levels enacted for this current fiscal year. So if House Republicans were really more serious about being tough on China, they'd be increasing Commerce's budget, not slashing it, because that's going to put on the chopping block policies that foster economic development and create a lot of jobs. So we should be building on the successful policies of the Biden administration and the Secretary, not undermining them, because our competitiveness, our national security, and our economic vitality depends on it. And again, thank you for all the things you've been doing to push all these initiatives that I mentioned. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the ranking member. Our witness today is Gina Raimondo, the Secretary of Commerce. Welcome, Madam Secretary. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you. Good morning. It's nice to be here. I've had the opportunity to get to know, I think, almost all of you and work with you, and I appreciate that. One of the best parts of being Commerce Secretary is it's really bipartisan, right? Working together on manufacturing, competitiveness, countering China, it's all bipartisan. And so it's really my pleasure to be here and to continue to work with you, in the weeks and months ahead. And I want to thank you for your time. Thank you to the chair and to the ranking member and to all of you. We are, as has been said, and I appreciate all the kind remarks, we are working hard and doing our best. We are, as you have said, implementing some of the most significant initiatives passed by Congress in the past few years, we at the Commerce Department, through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and through the CHIPS and Science Act. And I want to say thanks to these laws and the funding that Congress has provided, we're able to do the work of the American people. The budget that I have before you requests $11.4 billion in discretionary funding and $4 billion in mandatory funding for the department in FY25. I know you're not an appropriations committee, but your leadership matters. You've all demonstrated how passionate you are about these issues, and your leadership matters. And so I am here to ask you for your support of this funding. I just want to take my remaining time to briefly step through some of our top priorities. First, and this has been mentioned by almost all of you, this budget positions America to prevent China and other countries from obtaining U.S. technology, U.S. capital, and expertise for activities that threaten our national security. As Representative Pallone said, and McMorris-Rogers, we have to beat China. That requires a strategy, and that requires investment. The budget requests a total of $223 million, a $32 million increase for BIS to expand export control enforcement, as well as $5 million for ITA to address risks from outbound investments into technologies in China, which we believe could enhance their military. The budget promotes America's technological leadership and responsible innovation in AI. It requests $61.6 million for activities like research and development for AI safety, and we want to develop AI but also mitigate risks. These funds will empower NIST to implement central components of President Biden's AI executive order, including significant investments in the AI Safety Institute, which we have already stood up and are working hard to develop AI guidance. We also request $8.9 million to BIS to gather vital information on bad actors who may be threatening our national security by trying to develop frontier AI models using U.S. cloud infrastructure. A number of you mentioned supply chains. The budget supports prioritizing investments in resilient supply chains. We need to go from being reactive to proactive. We can't just react in the instance of a COVID or a bridge collapse. We need to be proactive to building and strengthening our supply chains. So it includes money for the Manufacturing USA program, for the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and money for ITA to support building a supply chain resiliency office. The budget provides resources to strengthen our relationship with our allies, to advance our shared values, and shape the strategic environment in which we operate vis-a-vis China. We need to outcompete China. Wake up every day asking ourselves, how do we outcompete China? That means we have to show up in the rest of the world, and this budget includes $379 million for ITA to expand exports and services so U.S. businesses can grow in foreign markets. The budget also requests new investments for EDA to build on tech hubs. A number of you have amazing tech hub proposals before us. I wish I could fund them all. We don't have the funds to do that, and I hope to work with you and others in Congress to figure out ways, creative ways to get more funding to invest in tech hubs. Finally, the budget invests in our fundamental science infrastructure. It invests over $400 million in fundamental research infrastructure at NIST and NOAA and NTIA for maintenance, renovations, and improvements at NIST campuses. I just want to conclude by saying we need support from Congress. If we will be efficient with the taxpayer dollars, but we need your support to make these investments so we can outcompete and support American workers and businesses, and I look forward to working with all of you to do that.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Appreciate it very much. I'll begin with I'll begin with questioning, and I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. Families are strapped, Madam Secretary, I think you know this, for cash during this time of inflation and economic uncertainty. One way they have been able to make ends meet is by using their home for income as a short-term rental and welcoming travelers into the area. The gig economy is increasingly benefiting rural areas, which in turn brings new economic streams to these towns, and I've seen it in my district. So the question is, what is the department doing to drive travel and tourism to rural areas and these new forms of income for families?
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you for your leadership on travel and tourism. You come from a state where it matters, so do I. I was the governor of Rhode Island, the ocean state. I'm a huge believer in the economic value of travel and tourism. We are, within our budget, implementing the Visit America Act. We have hired a terrific DAS for travel and tourism, and we are, within our budget constraints, doing everything we can to work with states, including rural areas, to promote travel and tourism. I have a little bit of good news. As you know, the U.S. is the #1 destination for foreign travelers. I wanted to report to you that the National Travel and Tourism Strategy had a goal of having 90 million international visitors to the U.S. by 2027. We think we're going to beat that goal. We think we'll have that done by 2026. To your point, I chair the Travel and Tourism Advisory Board. We have representatives from rural America. We're constantly listening to those stakeholders to figure out, what more can we do? All of that being said, I'd be happy to follow up with you if you have ideas on what we could do more of, because I agree with you, rural America is beautiful, and if we can get travelers to go experience it, we should.
Thank you. I appreciate it. The National Travel and Tourism Strategy lays out, as you said, the 5-year goal of increasing American jobs by attracting and welcoming 90 million visitors, and you say we're going to reach it by 2026, which we appreciate so much. You estimate that we'll spend about $279 billion by 2027. Can you speak to progress on reaching this goal? And you did. Maybe you want to elaborate a little bit. Are there specific areas you're seeking to prioritize?
Yes. So let me say this. I know you're a leader in the Visit America Act, and I strongly support having an assistant secretary. Most other countries do, and I think we should too. I know money doesn't solve every problem, but we are severely budget constrained in this respect. I'm implementing it, but without the funds to hire an assistant secretary and the office and the tools to do that, it's very hard to do that. Last year, we took a $2 million cut, and this year, if we have the House Appropriations Committee proposed cut of another 9% for ITA, it'll just make this work that much harder. So I do want to put a marker down on that for all of you who care about travel and tourism. One of the things that we have done is really engage with this Travel and Tourism Advisory Board. I have personally met with them on numerous occasions. What I try to do is listen to them, right? Like, what do you need? What can we do? We did a lot, for example, in COVID, helping the cruises to get people cruising again. We've done a lot in coastal communities to help them with workforce. You can't operate your restaurant or hotel if you can't find the workers. So usually my approach is listen to the people in the business of travel and tourism and ask them, how can we help you? And we try to meet their needs so they can do more business and hire more people.
Very good. Again, can you specifically, if you can make any recommendations with regard to the gig economy in rural areas? Because we've got a lot of beautiful areas, hidden treasures, as you know, throughout the United States. Any specific recommendations you can make with regard to that?
Permit me to come back to you on that, or maybe we could have a discussion about it. With the rise of Uber and Airbnb and et cetera, you're exactly right that that's who is increasingly in that economy. I think it's important that they have high-quality, decent jobs. But let me follow up with you on that.
Okay, very good. You know what, I'm going to go ahead and yield back and recognize the ranking member from the great state of Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky, for 5 minutes of questioning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to raise this issue. I understand that in commerce, that what you're doing is requiring child care for some workers, that it be provided from companies that deal with semiconductors. Child care, can you talk about that?
Yes, thank you. So we are not actually requiring companies to provide childcare, but what we are doing is saying to companies, if you want taxpayer money, you need to prove to us that you'll be successful, that you'll be a good steward of taxpayer money.
Okay.
That means prove to us that you're going to be able to hire the workers you need in the timeline that you need them. And so we've asked every company who wants money to give us a workforce plan. Show us, what are you going to do to train people, to hire people from high schools and community colleges and the like? And how are you going to make sure you have women on the job? Every one of you knows in your districts, we are at a historically low unemployment rate. The unemployment rate in the building trades right now is essentially zero. It's a couple of percent. If you're building a fab, it'll require somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 construction workers to build that fab. You will not be successful unless you find a way to get women into these jobs. And you will not be successful at that unless you have a child care plan. So what we're saying to companies is convince us you'll do a good job with taxpayer money, hiring and recruiting women, and making sure that they have access to high-quality, affordable child care. Otherwise, they're not going to get the job done. So I feel strongly about this. This isn't social policy. This is math. They have to get the job done with taxpayer money. They have to have women, engineers, construction workers, scientists, technicians, and that means thinking about child care.
So though it may not be required, you are mentioning child care as a way to get the women more involved, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Let me ask you this, or discuss this. I think it is really important that we are protecting abroad all the data and the privacy. We've been working on privacy issues here in this subcommittee and in this committee. So I am just wondering what Commerce is doing to protect Americans' data internationally, especially from China.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to agree with you and Congresswoman McMorris-Rodgers that we absolutely need a federal privacy legislation, and I applaud the work of this committee for getting us there. We're behind the rest of the world, so I support that. On top of that, a couple of areas where I'm very focused. You saw last week that the Commerce Department essentially banned Kaspersky, which is a Russian antivirus software company. We say you can't do business in America anymore because we think the Russian government are going to take America's data and put it back to Russia. I've recently launched an initiative around connected vehicles. I literally shudder to think of the risks to America's data and privacy of, let's say we had 1 million Chinese cars on the road, all connected, all collecting data from Americans, all of it going back to Beijing. So we are being very aggressive. Commerce Department has just put out, we're going through a rulemaking process on that. So I think, I could go on and on with AI. It's another risk. We're thinking hard about cybersecurity and data protection as it relates to AI. I think we have to move forward with technology. Absolutely, we have to lead the world. But more and more, we're getting concerned about protecting American consumers and children for making sure that our data doesn't get into the hands of the PRC.
Thank you. I want to just go back to that issue that I had raised earlier about the workers who are concerned that, especially CHIPS workers, I have been hearing this from labor unions and the Labor Caucus. And I just wondered if you had any comment on that
Yeah.
in the few seconds we have.
Look, it is concerning. It's unacceptable. It is concerning. We're working hand in glove with the Department of Labor. We have put out a set of good jobs principles, which we developed in partnership with the Department of Labor. If we're going to provide taxpayer money to companies, we expect the jobs that they create to be high-paying and safe working conditions. So we expect workers in those fabs to have the right to unionize should they choose. So it is a priority. President Biden obviously cares deeply about this, and so we're working on it.
Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thanks.
Gentlelady yields back now. Recognize the chair of the full committee, Mrs. Rogers, for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, thank you again for appearing before this committee. As you may know, I think you've referenced it, Ranking Member Pallone, Senate Commerce Chair Cantwell, and I have been working diligently to move forward on a comprehensive data privacy and security framework for the United States. In fact, our very first hearing in the subcommittee this Congress was about the importance of enacting a data privacy bill and promoting emerging technologies in our economic competition with China. The American Privacy Rights Act is going to provide Americans new rights over their data, but will also secure U.S. footing on the world stage on a number of tough topics. Can you discuss the challenges in demonstrating leadership abroad on cross-border data flows, trade agreements, promoting U.S. commerce without the U.S. having such a framework in place?
Yeah. So, Chairwoman, I just want to applaud you for your work on this. I think it's essential. I strongly support your work. I appreciate you doing it in a bipartisan way, making progress towards data privacy, and I would like to let you know I want to work with you on that so that that can be successful. So I just want to say a couple quick things. First, America right now has the best tech companies in the world. That's a good thing. That's good for our innovation, and we can outcompete China. However, they have to follow privacy rules to protect our consumers. You know, they have to have your bill and such. We have to set clear limits on how companies can collect, use, share personal data. And there have to be protections that are enforceable. And I know that's exactly what you're trying to do. I travel around the world. You know, I've been all over Asia, Europe, just Latin America just this year. When I go around the world, I try to convince these other countries to embrace our values of, you know, freedom, data protection, openness, reliability, security. Well, how can we lead in the world if we're not doing it ourselves? So once again, I think this is an incredibly important, long overdue, I will add, piece of legislation. And I think it matters here. But as you say, I think if we're going to lead the world and want to have open and secure and reliable internet and cloud and AI, we need to have privacy legislation here at home.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I want, as a follow-up, these big tech giants, technology companies, would you just speak, we do celebrate the innovation and leadership. Would you speak to what privacy rules are currently in place? You said, you know, that we need clear limits, how they collect, use, share, sell, protections for enforcement. What is currently in place to protect individuals' data in the United States of America from being manipulated, used, sold?
Yeah, I mean, as you well know, it's a hodgepodge of state regulations or other, you know, regulations. But what we desperately need is a federal piece of legislation that sets out standards that are enforceable, that every company in every state has to follow. So I would say the current protections are inadequate at best, and that's why we need a comprehensive piece of federal legislation.
Thank you, and it's so foundational. When we think about America's leadership, which I believe really matters, we must balance the personal rights while promoting innovation. I also wanted, to ask you, as we think about emerging technologies, it certainly has been a priority of mine for some time. I'm excited about the future of artificial intelligence. Semiconductor chips will certainly play an important role in achieving the promise of emerging technologies. You also know my concerns related to permitting, and the permitting that needs to take place takes way too long. Read an article again. Could be permitted in Japan in a year. It's taking 3 years in America, and we're not getting it done. How can the administration, or when will the administration tackle the problems that can't just be solved with money, but actually need to address the permitting and the duplicative and burdensome regulatory hurdles?
Yeah. So look, I face this every day in the work with semiconductor companies, but even more so in the work we're doing on internet, the labyrinth of permitting to lay a piece of fiber. I will say one piece of good news, which I haven't yet shared with you. When I was here 6 months ago, I was highly concerned about NEPA and the chips factories. I can report to you today that we've made a ton of progress on that, and we are on track to complete the environmental review for all of these companies before we issue the award. So I don't think that NEPA will be a holdup in any of that. Having said that, the President has called on Congress to pass comprehensive permitting reform, and I think that that is what is necessary. Obviously, we need to protect the environment, endangered species, clean water, clean air are a priority. But I agree with you. You are correct. It is too cumbersome, takes too long, is too confusing, and if we're going to have, not unlike what you're doing with privacy, I think it's time for a bipartisan, comprehensive piece of federal permitting legislation if we're going to improve the situation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. I completely agree. I'll just note for the record that TSMC, this was the article I was reading, the CEO was talking about building 2 fabs, one in Phoenix, one in Japan. They did the Japanese factory in 1 year. In the US, they've been under construction for 3 years, and the factory's still not finished.
Yeah.
More to be done. I yield back.
Agree.
Sorry,
we agree.
Yep.
I agree.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Generally yields back. We'll now take a brief recess for floor votes. We'll reconvene promptly 10 minutes after the last vote is called.
The subcommittee will come back to order, and I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Pallone, for your 5 minutes of questioning.
Mr. Chairman, I know it's not your fault, but I do have to say that in the future, based on this last vote, where the vote was closed with 92 members not being there and approaching the floor, we can no longer assume that just because a certain number of members haven't voted, that we can stay here and ask questions or continue our hearing. Again, it's a little ridiculous, but when I left, we had a discussion with Mr. Bilirakis about how there were 250 people that hadn't voted, but the speaker doesn't care. I'm not saying our particular speaker. So when we got to the floor, there were almost 100 members who hadn't voted. They closed the vote anyway. So what I'm saying is from now on, I think once the vote is called, one has to assume that you have to leave the committee and go vote. You can't look and say, oh, there's 200 or 100 or 300 that haven't voted yet. That doesn't mean anything. They're telling me now that they're going to close the vote when the time runs out. They're literally going to close the vote when the time runs out.
Not a first vote.
Yeah, in other words, they'll call the vote, and when the 15 minutes or the 5 minutes is over, the vote is closed. And so we have to assume that it's going to take us whatever time it does to get there, and that we can't look at how many people have yet to vote. It doesn't mean anything. They're just essentially saying when the time runs out, the board could be closed. So I'm just
the
saying,
gentleman yield?
Yeah, sure.
I agree with you. I watched it happen today, and I saw that several of our committee members that were here missed the vote. So I agree with you, and I ask unanimous consent for the gentleman's time to be restored to 5 minutes.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask Secretary Raimondo, I wanted to take this opportunity to issue about the important role of NTIA in helping to make sure Americans have access to affordable high-speed internet service. For millions of Americans, the cost of internet service is too high, and that's why we included a broadband affordability provision in the bipartisan infrastructure law. Providers that receive grant funds from NTIA to build out broadband infrastructure must offer a low-cost option to certain households in the built-out areas, and the statute allows states to determine what that low-cost figure will be. It also sets out a process for the NTIA to approve or disapprove of that number. Now, some Republicans have criticized this policy and characterized it as rate regulation, which I don't think that's true. So can you please tell us whether NTIA is engaged in rate regulation, if you would?
Yeah, thank you for asking the question. I do want to testify here on the record that we are not engaged in rate regulation. The statute does not permit us to be engaged in rate regulation, and I'm following the law. The statute does require us, though, to make sure that every state gives a low-cost option. And that's because in this day and age, the internet isn't a luxury. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. As you well know, go to school, go online, file for benefits, get a job, go to see your doctor. So we're gonna hold states' feet to the fire to follow the law. They have to have a low-cost option. You know, $200 a month, $100 a month is not low cost. And it's not rate regulation, but we're going to comply with the statute. By the way, I should tell you, we've already approved almost 20 states' plans, and we'll have the rest of them approved in the coming months. So we're on path. All the money will be obligated by the end of the year, and I firmly dispute the allegation of rate regulation.
All right, thank you. Now I want to turn to the supply chain issue again. In response to the supply chain crisis, the Department of Commerce launched a first-of-its-kind supply chain center that serves as an analytic engine for supply chain resilience within the federal government to help identify and mitigate supply chain risks and drive down the prices for critical consumer goods. So, Madam Secretary, how does this supply chain center identify and address supply chain challenges and specifically help drive down the cost of critical consumer goods, if you will?
Yeah, thank you. Look, we all learned the hard lesson in COVID. When supply chains get disrupted, prices go through the roof. And by the way, it could be COVID. We just saw the bridge collapse in Maryland, weather, floods, semiconductors. So what we are doing is we have built in the Department of Commerce, in ITA, a supply chain office. We have built an amazing analytical tool, which I'd be happy to show any of you. Welcome you to the office, or I'll come to you, that allows us to analyze the supply chain and predict ahead of time where we see vulnerabilities. So for example, if in a supply chain 100% of the goods come from one country, that's a vulnerability. And we say to ourselves, and it could be critical minerals, it could be chips, anything, and then we're going to be more proactive, saying, okay, if 100% of this comes from Malaysia, that's a risk. You know, if there's a typhoon in Malaysia, that goes out, that's a risk, and we're trying to get ahead of the problem. It will bring down costs. You know, it will bring down, exactly as you said. I mean, I'm looking at Representative Dingell. I mean, 10,000 workers were put out of work in Michigan for want of a single semiconductor chip that operated the windshield wipers, and we saw during COVID, car prices and used car prices and rental car prices went through the roof, all because of supply chain disruption. So in any event, I think we're doing a good job. We're not out of the woods. It's a continuous thing, and we have to continue to do more. I am asking for money in this budget to build out that supply chain office, and I do want to say we need the money to do the job.
Well, I think you, there's 45 seconds left, but I was going to ask you how, if the budget was cut the way the Republicans have proposed, you know, how is that going to affect your effort to reduce the cost of goods?
Yeah, we won't be able to do it. Listen, I was a governor. I watch every penny. I'm not here to say more money solves every problem, but if you want us to do this work, we do need money to hire the people, buy the software, do the analysis, reach out to companies. And we won't be able to do the work. You know, that's a fact. By the way, the money I'm asking for artificial intelligence, semiconductors, workforce, supply chain, countering China, it's all bipartisan. And it's not fat, it's necessary, and it'll be devastating.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. I recognize the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Bashan.
Thanks to Chair Bill Aracas for calling today's hearing, and thank you, Secretary, for being here and taking your time today to answer our questions. I think it is critical that Congress and the Department of Commerce do everything in their power to ensure that the United States remains the world's leader in innovation and that companies of all sizes are able to compete globally. That is why I'm pleased that this committee and the House of Representatives have recently passed the Promoting Resilient Supply Chains Act and the Deploying American Blockchains Act, both of which I co-led with Representative Blunt Rochester. Secretary, the supply chain exposure tool highlighted in your testimony is exactly the kind of work that the Promoting Resilient Supply Chains Act is meant to promote and codify. How do you ensure small and medium-sized businesses are aware of supply chain vulnerabilities and solutions? Because it's critical to utilize all the players in the American economy to strengthen our supply chains, not just the largest companies and participants.
First of all, thank you for your leadership, sincerely, on both of those issues, supply chain and blockchain, both important, and I appreciate your leadership. This is a challenge. There's no quick answer to this one, and I worry about it a lot. The biggest companies have the resources. It's actually the little companies who struggle the most. I'll tell you what a couple things we're doing, but I would also look forward to working with you on this. We run the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program at the Commerce Department, MEP. We have made sure that and all they do is work with small manufacturers. Your state has one, every state has one. We've put a supply chain person in every MEP. So if you're a little manufacturing company in Indiana and you're going to the MEP, there is a supply chain representative who will help you think through your supply chain. We have the Manufacturing USA Institute, same thing, focused on supply chains. The Commerce Department also has in every state a local representative, a business agent. That person we're equipping with our supply chain resources. So I will tell you, of all the things I do, reaching small companies is the hardest. Yeah. It's a real concern, and that's what we're doing. But of course, if you have any other ideas, I'd like to work with you.
Well, thanks for that response, and it was important, I think, to get that on the record out there so small and medium-sized companies understand there are resources available to help them assess the supply chain vulnerabilities that they may have.
Yes.
We can always do more, of course, but as you outlined, there are resources for that to happen. I'm also deeply concerned the trend of blockchain developers leaving the United States or forming in adversarial nations like China, which is why we introduced the Deploying American Blockchains Act. Are you aware of any efforts to help the private sector deploy and implement various distributed ledger technologies throughout the U.S. economy that you're doing at the Department of Commerce? Is there things we can do?
As you may know, or others may know, NIST, which reports up to me, a couple of years ago put out a report on blockchain on exactly this issue. Yep. What are the standards? How does it work? They do a lot of work with small companies, by the way, NIST. And so it's a tool, the blockchain report, to help companies learn how to implement blockchain, which is, as you know, distributed ledger technology is obviously very important. Yeah. For things other than just crypto.
Sure. That's exactly right.
You know, I think when people hear blockchain, they think crypto. Don't think that. Think blockchain, think industrial, manufacturing.
Agreed. In fact, that was a challenge when we did the legislation to change that. Another issue that we share concern with is around the possible cyber and security threats to consumers. In April, the Department of Commerce issued an advance notice of proposed rulemaking to investigate possible security risks associated with information and communications technology and services from countries of concern like China. I think it is important and critical that the government work alongside industry to help ensure that we do not stifle innovation. Starting out, have we had any instances our foreign adversaries are attempting to, for example, hack a connected vehicle out there? Because the concern is, you know, a broad attack on connected vehicles in the United States could be a pretty serious national security risk.
Huge. Fortunately, right now, China doesn't sell many vehicles in the U.S., and that's why we want to get on top of this, you know, before they do. The new cars, not autonomous vehicles, but a new electric vehicle, has thousands of sensors. It'll blow your mind, as it did mine. They listen to what you say in the car. They track where you go. They track your patterns. It's run by software. All the data can get back to Beijing. So what we are doing, we're in the process right now. We hope to put the rule out later this year to make sure that that data can't be collected and go back to the Chinese.
Okay. I'm out of time, but I just wanted, with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to say this. I hope that you can commit to following the formal rulemaking process and collect industry feedback on the proposed rule before it's finalized.
Yes,
Thank
I
you
will
very
do
much. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. I recognize the gentlelady from Florida, Representative Castor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Madam Secretary. You are a champion for American businesses, American workers, American competitiveness. You are a strong and effective leader for the Commerce Department, and it is appreciated.
Thank you.
Some of the economic development grants that come out of Commerce have paid such huge dividends for my booming Tampa Bay area. Many of just the simple EDA grants to help our tech accelerators have turned the Tampa Bay area into what was an economy relying on tourism and real estate and we have a good active port. But now we're a tech startup community. We're a community, we don't have a lot of big Fortune 500 companies and big corporations. We rely on the entrepreneurial spirit, and it has paid huge dividends. We have small businesses growing and thriving. The wages are higher, and the Tampa Bay Wave is one of our leading accelerators in the area, and I just want to thank your entire team for what they've done over the years in targeting those investments to our accelerators. Most recently, Tampa Bay Wave has received a grant from NOAA under the Ocean-Based Climate Resilience Accelerators Initiative, funded by the landmark Inflation Reduction Act. What they are telling me is that they now are bringing together new startup companies across the state of Florida. They heard the message that the agency put out to do more partnering, so they're partnering with South Florida Accelerator. They're taking your design and development funds and now are going for the next round of funding to support startups and entrepreneurs working on ocean-based climate resilience, attracting capital, maturing their technologies, scaling business models for climate challenges and economic developments. But I'm a little bit worried now looking ahead, looking at the proposed budget, the fiscal year budget proposed by the Republicans, that their partisan bill would cut commerce, economic development assistance for local communities by a large amount. It looks like almost maybe more than 10%. What will this do to our ability to grow these small businesses and entrepreneurs if you have to suffer through significant cuts like this?
Yeah, thank you for your question. You know, the work that I do that gets all of the attention, of course, is the CHIPS Act. You know, $6 billion to Intel, $8 billion to TSMC. The reality is that's a small number of companies. Most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, work for small businesses, entrepreneurial businesses, family-owned businesses, and that's the work of EDA. Like small grants, one community at a time, rural, coastal, urban, and a cut to EDA will hurt every community in America, like literally. Red states, blue states, rural, urban, because these are small amounts of money for workforce training, building facilities, incubators, and sometimes it's the only money that these partnerships are really eligible for. You know, they're not going to get venture capital money. These aren't going to be, it's not, your companies aren't, it's not the next Google necessarily, but it's a nice business. So I think it would be deeply unfortunate. This is bipartisan work. It helps support communities all over America. It doesn't get a lot of attention, but people in your community and all of your communities will feel it if it gets cut.
It gets a lot of attention across the Tampa Bay area because of the small investment from Commerce and EDA now is attracting 10, 20 times the amount in private investment and capital. And then sticking with NOAA a little bit, It's an interesting part of commerce, but it's an important one. You said you're going to focus on growing fundamental science research and then combine it with a new outlook for supply chains. And that sounds like that would help us with the nascent offshore wind industry that we're trying to grow in America. It would pay great dividends if we can lower the cost of energy, use clean energy. And I'd like to know, how is Department of Commerce and NOAA thinking about wind research, permitting, development, and how the new emphasis on supply chain focus could help lift this industry and the good-paying jobs it provides?
Yeah, exactly. President Biden has set a goal of 30 gigawatts by 2030 of offshore wind. I will say, as the governor of Rhode Island, we had the first offshore wind installation in North America. I know a lot about this. It created so many jobs, lowered the cost of energy and electricity, and got a lot of people in Rhode Island off of diesel and oil. Permitting still takes too long. I'll be the first to say it. And so we are working very hard. I personally have been engaged in an effort to try to streamline the permitting. We've asked for money in the budget to help to do that, to streamline the permitting so we can go faster to hit the goal and also create jobs.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. I now recognize myself for questioning. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
We saw hundreds of billions of dollars spent by the administration and Democrats in Congress through the IRA, IIJA, and other COVID-area packages. Unfortunately, though years have gone by since these funds were appropriated, very few projects have been completed or even started. From broadband to semiconductors to EV chargers, our constituents are still waiting to see where their tax dollars are going. There are many excuses for why this is the case: Washington's bureaucracy, permitting delays, as you just mentioned, and more, but one of the biggest issues I hear is workforce. The Biden administration has made no secret of their intent to use the CHIPS Act to benefit labor special interest. The CHIPS Act was first passed as a national security imperative, not a bill to increase the union rolls. The data is clear. Across the country, fewer and fewer U.S. workers are members of unions. I've seen that in my Michigan district. At the same time, many of these semiconductor facilities are struggling to find qualified workers to build their facilities. It would then be reasonable to ask, why then is the administration asking these companies to acquiesce to big labor and increase union workforce at their sites, even in states where union workforce is at an all-time low like Texas and Arizona? So, Secretary Raimondo, why then add these regulations requiring unions workforce conditions when doing business with the federal government? Does this not go against the intent of the law? And how does increased union participation in building chip facilities improve the national security imperative of establishing a secure and domestic semiconductor supply chain?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Look, I want to be clear. It is a national security program. I say it all the time. There is no union requirement. There is no child care requirement, as we talked about earlier. My first phone call I took early this morning was with the CEO of TSMC to talk about workforce, because as you say, every one of these companies is struggling to find enough workers. We believe if you're going to take taxpayer money, these people ought to have good jobs with decent wages, good working conditions, safe working conditions, and we believe, you know, if Americans in a facility want to unionize, they ought to be able to give them that opportunity. There is no such requirement. But what we are requiring is a workforce plan, and I stand by that requirement. We require every company to tell us what's your plan. How are you going to hire the workers? How are you going to attract women? How are you going to train people? And I think that that's just taxpayer protection. But fundamentally, I work very hard to make sure this is a national security priority and push back against any, you know, special interest, to use your words, who try to get us to veer from that national security objective.
Well, I encourage you to then make it very clear of that position to our president as well. The incentive is there for unionization, especially using the CHIPS Act, and I think that's a great concern to us. Let me move on. Since I listed all the spending bills enacted, won't that cause inflation to rise and have a harmful effect on small and medium-sized businesses who are struggling, not only in the area of workforce, but just staying alive?
I don't think so. I mean, look, if anything, the fact that we don't make any semiconductor chips, leading-edge semiconductor chips in America, that's driving inflation. The fact that we buy them all from one company in Taiwan is a national security risk, and lack of supply drives inflation. These investments, whether it's in broadband, roads, bridges, water, they're investments. It's not profligate spending. I believe it'll make America stronger, able to outcompete the world, able to compete with China. And, you know, with respect to your issue, you know, I can't speak to EV chargers and such, but, you know, there are cranes all over Arizona and Texas because of CHIPS plants. Can we go faster? I'm sure we can. I'm always trying to go faster, drive my team crazy. But, you know, we had a middle mile ribbon cutting this past Monday, putting money out the door to like connect people to the internet. So I'll work with you to do more, go faster, be more transparent, but I don't think these are inflationary. I think it's what America needs to thrive.
Thank you. My time has expired. Now I recognize the gentlelady from Pure, Michigan, Representative Dingle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the committee for holding this important hearing, and Secretary Raimondo for being here. I have so much to ask, I'm not going to do a lot of flowery language, because this really does matter. When, you know, I'm not old, but I'm seasoned, and at one point we made 100% of the chips in this country. When I started in the industry, we made 40%, and now we're down to 7 and 8%, and not even did as the Secretary pointed out, the lack of chips contribute to inflationary issues for the auto companies, but it's a national and economic security issue, and until we get them as fast as we can being built here by American workers and trained, we are going to continue to have economic and national security issues. So I want to thank you, Madam Secretary, for the proactive leadership you're taking to secure our automotive and information communication technology services supply chains from threats posed by foreign adversaries, which is something I'm very worried about, particularly China. I appreciate the efforts outlined in your advance notice of proposed rulemaking to inform regulations for securing and safeguarding supply chains for connected vehicles. Can you elaborate quickly on the action the Department of Commerce is taking as it relates to the risks associated with ICTS components in connected vehicles that are made by foreign entities of concern?
Yes, so as you just said, we're in the middle of the process. We received a lot of comments. The comment period closed in April. We have to go through all of those comments. I hope to have the rule out, I don't know, later in the fall, certainly by the end of the year. And I don't know how, we could go from everything from banning Chinese EVs on the roads in America to regulations on their software, maybe all the data has to be housed in America. I want to make one very important point, and I'll be brief. USTR recently said they're going to put 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs. I support that. I think that's great. America can compete if the level playing field is level. That's an economic issue. What I'm worried about, what I'm doing, is the national security issue of all this data making its way back to the Chinese military. So anyway, we're working on it. I'll have the rule out by the end of the year, and we're working with industry to make sure we don't have unintended consequences.
It's very important that we do that. The fact of the matter is, as you know, and I've discussed it, and I know my colleagues there agree, is that China's on our streets testing their vehicles, collecting data, and not letting us on their streets in China to collect vehicles.
Yes, you know, it's interesting. You can't drive your Tesla to the airport in Beijing or Shanghai. Can't do it. China doesn't allow it. You can't drive your American-made, American electric vehicle near military bases, hospitals, airports in China.
So why are we doing that here? And what you're doing matters. As our vehicles become smarter, safer, and cleaner with emerging technologies, it's essential to fully understand the implications and the potential, the real, not potential, the real security risks, particularly when this technology comes out of countries like China. What are they tracking? What are they putting? So let me ask you this, Madam Secretary. Should the Department of Commerce determine that vehicle-generated data from components of connected cars under the control of a country of concern present an unacceptable risk to national security? And if you do find that, what steps could the Department of Commerce take to protect the American people?
Yeah, in the most extreme case, we could say no Chinese connected vehicles allowed in America. We could say the software has to be American-made. We could say the data has to reside in the U.S. Like, we have different, and we haven't decided that yet. We're going through the comments. Fundamentally, I would tell you the more work I've done on this, the scarier it is. These connected vehicles are so sophisticated. The data that they can collect on you, your kids, your family, U.S. military members, drive around in them. So I don't know precisely what we will do, but I tell you, we're going to be very, very, very serious and diligent and do what we need to do to protect the American people.
Thank you. And I think it's imperative as we are doing this that we educate the American people. Because I think too many people do not understand what the risk is. I'm running out of time.
No, that's a good point.
I'm so off script. But I'm going to ask you one other question, which is that you've seen Chinese companies like BYD citing manufacturing or assemble capabilities in Michigan to skirt the UMC rules. Yeah. And that's something we've got to talk about in trade as well. But as part of the rulemaking, are you considering Chinese vehicles assembled in Mexico?
I believe that we are, yes. But that's an excellent question, and let me look into it.
Thank you. I have 4 seconds left, so I guess I better stop. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields back. Now we'll recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Duncan, for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, thanks for being with us today. Would you agree with me that we're in a new economic Cold War with China and that economic policy is central to the great competition with China's, the communist China, including Section 301 tariffs against the Chinese products?
I agree we're in a great competition with China, and 301 tariffs help us, and I agree we have to win.
So I believe in free trade. I think you do as well, but I believe in fair trade.
Exactly.
Bottom line is China cheats.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, the Chinese Communist Party is now seeking to circumvent Section 301 by taking Chinese steel and Chinese parts to Thailand and setting up shell companies that then dump cheap goods in the United States. This includes top-mount refrigerators. As you may know, Electrolux has been making Frigidaire refrigerators in the heart of my district, Anderson, South Carolina, for the past 25 years. Because of the entry of Chinese dumped top-mount refrigerators into the American market, Frigidaire has seen its market share go down, while Chinese company Midea has grown its market share from 8% in the third quarter of 2023 to 28% last quarter. They've done this with 40 pounds of Chinese steel in each unit, while advertising their no-tariff product at half the price of its U.S. competitors. The impact of my district has already cost 160 jobs and counting. That's why Electrolux has now filed an anti-dumping petition with your office against Midea, and I believe my staff has given your staff the details on that petition. Madam Secretary, can you assure my constituents that you will give this situation the thorough investigation that it deserves in light of this second Cold War with China and the economic impacts that is already having in my district?
Yes, absolutely. As you know, this is a quasi-judicial process, so I'm limited in what I can say here. 100%. Look, China cheats. You're right. China cheats. They subsidize their companies. They don't pay fair wages. They dump. They circumvent, whether it's Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, et cetera, and it's not fair. American workers can outcompete anyone if we have a fair fight. So if I can follow up with you, in a private setting, but as I said, 100%, we will look into it, we'll take it seriously, and if we assess that we need to, we'll levy a duty to level that playing field.
Level the playing field. Finally, I'd be remiss in my duties as chair of the Energy Subcommittee if I didn't at least put a plug in for the application for recognition of the South Carolina Nexus for Advanced Resilient Energy under the CHIPS and Science Act funding. Is critical to our energy future that we solve the problems of getting more power onto our grid and do it in an environmentally and ecologically sound way. And I hope you'll consider our state's application to partner with you in that way. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yes, we will.
Gentleman yields back. Now we'll recognize the gentleman from the great state of Florida, Mr. Soto, for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome back, Madam Secretary. I remember it was the middle of 2021, in the height of the pandemic, and we saw that supply chain havoc hurting our economy, chip shortages that were especially affecting vehicles, computers, and appliances, increased costs, and that's when we all started talking about rebuilding our national capacity for microchips, and the CHIPS and Science Act started being the talk of the town. I just want to thank you, because I remember you convening members of Congress, industry leaders, defense leaders, and your leadership was critical as we worked on this issue. And also thank you for your support of NeoCity's aerospace and space microchip manufacturing. It's been a game changer for Central Florida. We have great partners like Osceola County, Skywater, IMAC, Plug and Play, Lockheed Martin, a lot. And it aligns with NASA and our local aerospace industry in East Orange County and Cape Canaveral, just a few miles away. And this is a community where it's been transformational, especially being a majority Hispanic community. And we've seen our first technicians for microchip manufacturing graduating from certification programs at Valentia College, as well as engineers coming out of UCF. How is the implementation of the CHIPS and Science Act going, and how is it affecting manufacturing and costs for the American people, both in Florida and across the nation?
Yeah, thank you for what you said. I think it's going very well. You know, we always want to be better, but we were allocated $39 billion to invest in companies. We've already committed more than 30 of the $39 billion. So we're moving, I think, at a pretty fast clip. And you will see like hundreds of thousands of jobs created in America because of that. We're now turning to the part of the work where we will invest in smaller companies and supply chain companies. We don't just want to have the big factories. We need the suppliers, the wafer companies, substrates, chemicals, et cetera. Importantly, and I know this is important to you and all of us, we're also standing up a workforce center of excellence because we need the workers. You know, we need the workers to build the fabs, work inside of the fabs. So we are collaborating with colleges, universities, community colleges, HSIs, as many institutions of higher education that we can in this workforce center of excellence to make sure that every American has a shot to get one of these jobs and they have the skills they need to be qualified for the jobs.
And we're seeing that in Central Florida, private industry being empowered by the CHIPS Act, public institutions like Valentia College training that new workforce. We literally have to work to stand up ecosystems. And we've seen a tripling of factory construction across the U.S. There are a lot of folks who a year or two ago thought we were going to go heading straight into a recession, and yet laws like this really helped us avoid that, along with amazing workforce. And Orlando tourism is our top industry, and we're proud to have world-class theme parks like Disney, Universal, SeaWorld. I'm a big fan, along with the chairman, of Brand USA and the work that Commerce is doing. We also are big fans of the 2022 National Travel and Tourism Strategy, promoting diverse, inclusive, and accessible tourism. We got the Air Carrier Access Advisory Committee back into the FAA. What is the department doing, or how is it critical to have full funding in the president's budget to ensure accessible travel for all Americans and foreign tourists, including those with disabilities?
Yeah. By the way, on the point you said, one really cool thing is for every dollar of CHIPS money that public money we're putting out, we've seen $12 of private capital.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you said. We're pulling forward the private capital, which is what gets the engine going. We talked earlier about travel and tourism. We need the funding. You know, we want to hire an assistant secretary for travel and tourism, and for that person to have a team and the tools they need to do the job. We took a cut last year. There's a proposed cut for this year. So we're implementing to the best of our abilities within our budget constraints. We have a fantastic Deputy Assistant Secretary. We've engaged with the Travel and Tourism Advisory Board, fantastic people. Listen, I'm a believer. I'm from the Ocean State. I get it. These are good jobs. These are real jobs. And we want to do whatever we can in all of your, not just places like Florida, but rural places that we talked about to stimulate the travel and tourism economy.
Well, we appreciate your commitment to tourism and have to get you the funding to do the job. And welcome.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Now we'll recognize Mr. Fulcher from the state of Idaho. You're recognized for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here today, for your testimony. And I had a opportunity to hear your opening statement, and you made the statement that we need to outcompete China, and I agree with that. We do need to outcompete China. I would share from my perspective some of the policies of the administration, not directly due to you, but some of the policies of the administration don't necessarily agree with that. And I'll just give you one example, and that's the mandates on electronic vehicles as they're coming around now. While we're doing a mandate on electronic vehicles, or at least attempting to, we're simultaneously restricting access to their domestic supply chain for those electronic vehicles. Those same electronic vehicles we're trying to mandate the use of. And that, in my view, is kind of playing into the hands of China and where they are positioned. And I'll give you a specific example and then kind of move to our discussion point. But critical minerals is one of those things. We have critical mineral resources here in China, in the U.S., many of which are needed for the production of electronic vehicles and batteries and so on. But yet we have such restrictions on the access to those. And periodically, when we do get a permitting done, which is always an onerous process, then we have other issues. And that's where I kind of wanted to just get some dialogue going with you. We have a specific situation in my state of Idaho where there's a cobalt mine. It took years to get permitted. And magically, when it did, the market price fell through the floor. And the business person in me starts to take a look at that and peel that onion back, and all of a sudden, it appears that some foreign competition has magically lowered prices and increased supply, and they don't abide by the same rules that we do when it comes to environmental compliance. They don't abide by the same rules that we do when it comes to labor and the type of labor that is utilized. And so this is, I've kind of covered a lot of ground there, but I just wanted to get your dialogue there, some input. Is this something that you're watching? We need to outcompete China, but we're not playing by the same set of rules when it comes to a lot of these things. Other examples have been mentioned. I'm bringing up the issue of mining and the harvesting of critical minerals. Could I get your feedback on that?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the question, and thank you for highlighting this issue. Back to what Representative Dingell said, I'm not sure people understand the implications of this. So lithium, cobalt, nickel, these are things that are primarily mined and processed not in the United States. We are far too dependent on China, which means they can do exactly what you just said. They can tank the spot price and hurt all U.S. businesses, or they could raise the price and take us hostage. To the extent that we have lithium, cobalt, et cetera, in the United States, we have to figure out how to access it. And so we are working hard on this. We also have to work with our allies. So for instance, the Philippines, or Indonesia, or Japan. These are allies, critical mineral rich, and we should try to figure out how do we work with Australia. Right? Australia is getting hurt by China and China's coercion, not playing by the rules. So while we work to figure out how to work with you in Idaho, Nevada has a lithium deposit, how do we access what's in the U.S., we also have to work with our allies around the world to, create a club of allies so we can stand together against China's unfair, coercive practices. The only thing, and I'll work with you on it. I'd be happy to work with you on it. Come out to Idaho, we can talk about it. The exciting thing with, meeting climate change with EVs and such, and chips is exciting. It all depends on critical minerals. So electric vehicles, semiconductors, silicon, we are about to become batteries, lithium batteries. We're about to become more critical mineral reliant. And so the issue you raise is about to become so much more important, and we've got to get after it.
Well, I thank you for that, and I'll just close my comments because I'm out of time by saying we're some of these organizations that are trying to do this work, we put them through so much. The permitting process, another topic totally, but is so incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And these organizations that are truly trying to be very respectful of the process and do so in a responsible fashion. So I will take you up on that opportunity to converse further. And thank you for your response. I yield back.
Yeah, thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Thank you. I'll recognize now Ms. Clark from the state of New York for your 5 minutes of questioning.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our ranking member, Chakowski, for convening this hearing, and to Secretary Raimondo for joining us today to discuss the important work of the Department of Commerce. Under the leadership of Secretary Raimondo, the Commerce Department has helped our economy emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic stronger than that of any other country in the world, ensured that America remains a global leader in emerging technology like artificial intelligence, and strengthened our national security through its work to promote more resilient supply chains. Commerce has done such important work in implementing the key legislative accomplishments of the Biden administration. The CHIPS and Science Act, as many of my colleagues have noted today, enacted last Congress, charged Commerce with allocating funds to spur semiconductor development and manufacturing in the United States. To date, Commerce has announced nearly $30 billion in grant awards and up to $25 billion in loan and loan guarantees. These grants and loans will not only supercharge our economy as we onshore more critical technology sectors, but strengthens our national security by lessening our dependence on foreign countries for this essential technology, and I commend the Department of Commerce for its work in this space. In addition to the CHIPS and Science Act, the Commerce Department, through NTIA, has done more extensive work in our collective effort to close the digital divide. The bipartisan infrastructure law's historic broadband investments demonstrate Congress's strongest attempt to date to bridge the digital divide and bring all Americans reliable, affordable access. Unfortunately, one of our key broadband adoption affordability programs, the Affordable Connectivity Program, experienced a lapse in funding this month due to the House Republican leadership's refusal to move my bipartisan bicameral legislation to provide additional funding. This obstinance, has forced the 23 million ACP-enrolled American households to make their near impossible decision between paying for broadband and the critical lifeline to work, education, and financial opportunities, and other essentials like medicine and food. And despite Republican leadership's intransigence, I remain open to finding a way forward for this crucial program. Additionally, the bipartisan infrastructure law included a separate BEAD-specific affordability provision assigning NTIA administrative oversight and programmatic support responsibilities. Under the bipartisan infrastructure law, service providers that accept funding from the BEAD program to build broadband networks must offer a low-cost service option. Despite these statutory requirements, some on the other side of the aisle incorrectly claim that this is improper rate regulation. Secretary Raimondo, can you please explain for the committee how the ACP and other broadband affordability requirements will fully unleash the historic investments made in the BEAD program? And could you also speak to the importance of each state adopting a robust, low-cost broadband option?
Yes, thank you for your question, and thank you for your leadership. ACP is necessary. It's literally a life or death situation for many people. I have personally spoken with people in rural America, all over this country, who the nearest hospital or doctor is 100 miles away. If you don't have the internet, you don't get to see the doctor. The internet isn't a luxury. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's a necessity. We saw it in COVID. It's a necessity to go to school, get a job, see the doctor, run a business, run a dairy farm. I've been in rural Wisconsin. It is heartbreaking to hear these dairy farmers who say, I can't predict the weather, I can't buy my equipment, I can't, et cetera. ACP, if you don't renew that, and I'll do anything I can to work with anybody to get that renewed, it's pulling the rug out from under 23 million Americans who just deserve a shot. $100, $200 a month is not affordable. Sometimes $50 a month isn't affordable. Like I said, this is not a luxury. So, and we are not engaging in rate regulation. Statute doesn't permit it. I have no interest. I'm not a regulator. I don't want to be a regulator. I'm not getting into the business of regulating. But statute says every state has to provide a low-cost plan. So we're not rubber stamping the plans. You know, I think between 15 and 20 states have already had their plans approved. We'll approve them as soon as we can. But you have to make sure, you know, we're going to hold their feet to the fire to make sure that they have a truly low-cost plan, which, by the way, varies from state to state. We are providing states flexibility. It's more expensive to lay fiber in, you know, a rural mountainous area than in a state like Rhode Island. We get that. So we'll work with you and provide flexibility, but you have to, you know, do what the law says.
Very well, I thank you. And it's 23 million households, so more than 23 million people. We estimate maybe around 98 million individuals or more who unfortunately are.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Yes, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now yield time to the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Harshbarger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Secretary. The Commerce Department's Assistant Secretary for Travel and Tourism is responsible for helping promote the tourism industry in the United States. In Tennessee, our music heritage has long been a draw for visitors across the country, specifically in Northeast Tennessee, my hometown. We have Bristol, the birthplace of country music, and the Northeast Tennessee is also home of Dolly Parton. We have a world-renowned theme park, Dollywood, in Pigeon Forge. And today, Congresswoman Barragan and myself introduced the American Music Tourism Act and legislation to explicitly include the promotion of music tourism in the role of the Assistant Secretary for Travel and Tourism. We think it's just common sense to recognize tourism as a catalyst for U.S. economic development. It's a fast-growing industry for the entire country, with projections estimating it will generate more than $11 billion in revenue by 2032. Does this sound like legislation you'd be willing to work with me to get signed into law?
Absolutely. First, I do have to say I'm a huge, huge Dolly Parton fan.
Great.
I had the opportunity to meet her a few years ago in Rhode Island. I was the governor, and she came to the folk festival, and I was totally starstruck.
Yeah.
But besides that, yes, I mean, we've talked with a lot of members today about how important it is. These are good jobs. There's a misperception that tourism jobs are low-quality jobs.
Yes, ma'am.
And that isn't true.
Exactly.
So I would absolutely love to work with you in a bipartisan way. I'll follow up with you and
Yes,
see if I can help.
please do. That would be great. The National Marine Fisheries Service, which is part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration at the Department of Commerce, is working on a biological opinion resulting from an Endangered Species Act, Section 7 consultation request from the Department of Interior to assess potential impacts to endangered species in the Gulf of Mexico, and as a result of Department of Interior permitted oil and natural gas activities. Is the National Marine Fisheries Service still on schedule to complete the biological opinion in early 2025, as was previously indicated?
Let me find you, I don't know off the top of my head, but I will get back to you later today.
Yeah, that would be great. And the next question is, the National Marine Fisheries Service is also slated to publish the final rule designating the Rice's whale critical habitat in the Gulf of Mexico in the coming months. The designated area will be analyzed by the National Marine Fisheries Service, and could be used as a reason to impose restrictions on oil and gas activities in the critical habitat area. It could also lead to severe disruptions for other marine industries. And my understanding is that there's little evidence to suggest that the Rice's well is present in any meaningful capacity in the central and western Gulf of Mexico. And imposing harmful restrictions on Gulf users could even have more safety implications for Gulf mariners. In your opinion, is there sufficient science on Rice's wells to determine critical habitat, or are you familiar with that?
I am very familiar with this. This is in the middle of an active rulemaking, so I really am not permitted to comment on the details. Here's what I promise you. We're committed to following the science. We are reading every comment and engaging broadly with stakeholders, and we are committed to finding that right balance between, I'm the Commerce Secretary, commerce, enabling commerce, and also, though, like I said, following the science.
Yeah, we don't want to stifle these guys who make a living in the Gulf, so that would be great. The last question that I have time for is the United States is a world leader in the development and deployment of Open RAN wireless networks. And as we know, the Commerce Department through NTIA continues to administer the Public Supply Chain Innovation Fund to help entrants enter the Open RAN ecosystem. And my question is, what additional steps can you and the administration take to ensure that we remain the world leader of Open RAN networks?
Yeah, thank you. So for those of you who aren't totally familiar with ORAN, this is how we compete with China. Huawei is all over the world because it's cheap. Go to Latin America, Asia, they all buy Huawei because it's cheap. We need them to buy American. And so the secret to that is ORAN, the software. It allows us a product which is competitive. So we are putting grants out. I'll get back to you and let you know exactly where we are. I know I don't want to say the wrong thing. We're working hard to get the money out the door. It's a new technology, so what we need to do is work with companies and entrepreneurs to quickly develop the technology so they can deploy it. As far as I'm concerned, we have to develop as fast as possible so we can be competitive.
Well, I look forward to you getting back with me. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time has expired. I now yield 5 minutes to the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you so much, Chair and Ranking Member Schakowsky, for holding this morning's hearing. And I want to thank Secretary Raimondo for your testimony. Always good to see you. We know that the good things that AI can do, but we will not be able to realize the full potential of this revolutionary technology of AI if it's not developed and deployed responsibly. What safeguards are necessary to ensure AI is deployed in a manner consistent with our fundamental American values and rights?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. We're right now in the Commerce Department, we have stood up the AI Safety Institute, and I will say that we are asking for funding for that. We need to figure out, for example, what is adequate testing of these models. These companies say they red team. Well, what defines adequate red teaming to test them before they come out? We need to define watermarking. We're all worried about deep fakes. So they have to put a proper watermark on it so you know it's a real person or AI generated. So anyway, we're in the early innings of figuring this out. I think that what I'm trying to figure out, and we'll work with anyone to do, is how do we regulate it in a way that doesn't stifle the innovation in these early innings, but also how do we keep Americans safe? I will say, we're asking for a modest amount of money for this AI Safety Institute, less than what Europe, the UK, Korea are putting into this, way less than China, and we need the money to figure out how to keep Americans safe from AI.
I think you knew my future questions because that's what I was going to ask. How would the House Republicans' proposed budget cuts affect Commerce's ability to carry out the executive order that the president released last year?
Yeah, look, we're spending, thank you for the $10 million last year. We're making good use of it. We're asking for about 45 this year. China will spend multiples of that. Even the UK is spending more than that. So I don't know how we cannot make those investments. If we're going to lead the world in AI, which we need to do, then we need to make these investments in the basic science to figure out the best ways to keep Americans safe.
So on the opposite end, how would funding levels proposed in President Biden's budget strengthen commerce's mission to boost American innovation and competitiveness?
We could do the job, right? We can do the job on behalf of the American people so AI flourishes and we lead the world.
As simple as that. Thank you, and I yield back.
Hard job. It's not that simple, but that's the plan.
I know it's not simple. You're
Yeah.
saying money helps.
Thank you. Necessary.
I thank the gentlelady for the simple answer, simple question.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Representative Obernotti.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Raimondo, it's very nice to see you again. I'd like to continue the line of questioning from Representative Kelly about artificial intelligence. I know you and I share a recognition of the importance of that topic. As you know, I'm the chairman of the House Artificial Intelligence Task Force, and we have been working very diligently to try to put together a regulatory plan and framework for AI. And I know you've been working on this topic as well. Your budget requested $8.9 million for the Bureau of Industry and Security to implement mandatory reporting requirements under the Defense Production Act for domestic AI developers. And this is a topic that you and I have had a discussion of before. I don't want to talk about the reporting requirements because this is a debate that we're having within the task force, but I specifically want to ask about your invocation of the Defense Production Act as the authority to make these requirements, because as you know, the DPA was intended to be used in times of wartime to secure our procurement supply chains for munitions. And we seem to be far afield from that. We have no declarations of war, we've withdrawn from Afghanistan, and the producers that you're proposing to apply this requirement to have nothing to do with our defense supply chain. So how is the Defense Production Act an appropriate source of authority for the Department of Commerce to require this reporting?
Yeah, so I've enjoyed working with you on AI, and there's a lot more for us to do. We think that whether it is legacy semiconductor chips, we're using the DPA for that, or AI or cloud infrastructure, it is national security. Yes, it's not tanks and missiles, but today, in the modern world, AI, semiconductors, data centers, satellites, this unmanned vehicles, drones, this is all technology. And when I think of protecting America, I don't just think of tanks and missiles and munitions. I think of this. AI, for example, in the hands of the Chinese military, our sophisticated AI, in the hands of the Chinese military, or Russia or a nation state, as applied to nuclear weapons, bioterrorism, is unbelievably scary. So we have assessed that in the light of those threats, it is appropriate to use the Defense Production Act. Like legacy chips, for example, we were talking before with your colleagues. China is not playing by the rules. They are subsidizing the crap out of their industry, and it's going to hurt us. It's going to hurt our ability to make those chips. So, and that'll hurt us in times of war, right? Every Javelin missile has 300 chips. F-15 fighter jets, these are chips, chips, chips. We need to make them, and China will undermine our ability to do that. So anyway, we could talk about it. I hear your concern, but I think that in this day and age, technology is the front line of our defense as it relates to new age of war, and I think DPA is appropriate.
We are in furious agreement on the fact that AI is critical to our national security. But what we disagree on is whether or not the Department of Commerce has the authority under the DPA to require this reporting. And we're on the same team about this. And let me tell you, we're going to get there. We're the AI task force, we're having our 9th hearing this week, ironically on the topic of transparency and privacy. So we're going to get there, but please let's continue to work as a team and not let this turn into a tug of war between the legislative branch and the executive branch.
Yeah.
Because this is part of a budget request. Now you're going to force us to put language in our appropriations to you that says you can't use this to do something that we don't think you have the authority to do. And I prefer not to go there.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to ask about is you are asking for funding to stand up the AI and Emerging Technologies Policy Lab at NTIA. One concern I have about this, and I think NIST and the AI Safety Institute are doing great work, NTIA is doing great work, but I'm concerned about possible duplication and the efficient use of taxpayer dollars, because the last thing that we want, we know AI is the shiny new object, the last thing that we want is multiple agencies at multiple places within the executive branch working on the same thing. So can you explain how we're going to avoid that kind of duplication?
Yeah, so I have 1 second, so I'm going to follow up with you on that.
No, that's my time, that's not your time.
Okay. Then. Look, I just want to say on the other thing,
I would say it's all of our time.
Okay.
I'll concede the point,
Give me 10
Mr. Chairman.
seconds.
So
10
finish
seconds,
it quickly.
10 seconds. We need different tools. We need to modernize our tools at BIS. I'd be the first to work with you on that, right? That's why ICTS, codify it. So we'll follow up, because I don't want to fight about this. I agree with you, but you got to give us the tools to fight the fight. Second thing on AI, it's two very different things. NIST is focused on the science of standards, the science of safety of AI. NTIA is focused on like AI for good, discrimination, bias, et cetera. But I'd be very happy to sit with you and have a proper discussion.
All right, we'll do that. Thank you for the flexibility, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired, and now recognize the gentlelady from Massachusetts, Representative Strahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Tchaikovsky, for holding this hearing, and thank you to Secretary Raimondo. It's great to see you again. It's great to have you leading the Department of Commerce. Your department is at the epicenter of our nation's efforts to strengthen our supply chain, responsibly develop new technologies, and respond to the ongoing climate crisis, and I commend you on your commitment on all those important issues. That's why I share with my colleagues in their disappointment that the Republicans' draft appropriations package for the department fails to meet this moment by fully funding the department's programs that keep our economy strong and competitive. It's especially true of the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act, which this committee had an outsized role in crafting and passing last Congress. The legislation included billions of dollars for the department to invest in American superconductor manufacturing, strengthen our supply chain, and prepare our workers for the 21st century. And again, commend the department for its progress in rolling out these programs. However, like many of my colleagues, I was disappointed that $3.5 billion in funds for CHIPS grants was diverted away from their intended purpose in the must-pass government funding package that became law earlier this year. Those funds went to Secure Enclave, which deserves to be funded and is an important defense and intelligence priority to build semiconductors in a secure facility for our national security critical purposes. But I struggle to see why it couldn't be funded independently through the Department of Defense rather than being diverted away from the CHIPS funding meant to strengthen our semiconductor manufacturing industry. So, Secretary Raimondo, can you just speak to the importance of fully funding the CHIPS manufacturing programs and the impact that unforeseen cuts will have on the ability for the department to sufficiently carry out Congress's intent?
Thank you. Taking that money and earmarking it for Secure Enclave puts us at a significant disadvantage. We are oversubscribed, right? We are over, it's good news, right? We're oversubscribed. There are many more excellent companies, big and small alike, who we should provide grants to so they can expand in America so we can be stronger. Like we were talking about, it's a national security priority. Having said that, Secure Enclave is incredibly important too and deserves to be funded, and we're working literally every day with the DOD and OD&I to make sure it's funded. That we need to find the money. It is a national security imperative to get the CHIPS money reinstated. Yep. In whatever way you can figure out how to do that, but it is absolutely essential.
Yeah, and you're right about oversubscribed. I mean, unfortunately, not every project can be funded. That was the case for Helfrich Brothers, a manufacturer of industrial pressure vessels in the city of Lawrence, which I have the privilege to represent, and I know you know well, Madam Secretary. Pressure vessels are critical requirements for the semiconductor supply chain as they store high purity gases needed in the manufacturing process. And Helfrich Brothers is currently at production capacity due to the increased demand from the semiconductor industry, which could create a bottleneck in the supply chain that CHIPS and Science was meant to strengthen. I remain committed to fully funding the programs necessary to strengthen our semiconductor manufacturing process at every phase, and I look forward to our continued work together on that front. Finally, I too would like to switch to artificial intelligence, and I'm pleased that the department is working hard to implement the President's executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. Part of that order directed the department to work with our international allies to develop responsible global standards for AI. I know you've talked a lot about AI already, but hoping that you could describe for us what the department is doing to engage in international efforts to establish standards and policies for AI and how Congress can support those efforts.
I think it's critical we work with our allies. We can't do this. We cannot do this alone. In fact, at 1 o'clock, I have a meeting with my Korean and Japanese counterparts to talk exactly about this. We've started to work with the EU. You know, we have to get a group of like-minded countries who share our values, who are committed to our values, to commit themselves with us around these safety guidelines for how AI is developed. And the very first thing you can do is fund the AI Safety Institute, because this stuff has to be based on science, and we need the money to fund the science and lead the world, lead Korea, lead Japan, lead India to come to aligned standards of safety.
Message received. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlelady. And I recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Joyce.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to wave on to this hearing today. And thank you, Secretary Raimondo, for coming back to the Hill to testify again. Secretary Raimondo, both you and Assistant Secretary Davidson have testified before various congressional committees that you are deferring to the states in the administration of the BEAD program and not forcing states to rate regulate. Just last year in December, Mr. Davidson assured this committee that you would not engage in rate regulation and that you would, and I'm quoting, embrace the sort of laboratory of democracy. Let different states approach this in different ways, unquote. In fact, last month, you testified in the Senate that the Department of Commerce is, again, I'm quoting, not in the business of rate regulation. Despite these statements, we have heard repeatedly that this is not aligned with the reality that's occurring on the ground. You have approved only a small number of state plans, all of which appear to regulate broadband rates by adopting a specific price for broadband service. We've heard from numerous states that NTIA is requiring them to specify rates for various broadband offerings in order to receive that final approval of its initial proposal. Multiple broadband offices have told us that the pressure from NTIA is real and that the threat of losing funds was too great not to give in to these demands. Some states have also complained that you, specifically, Madam Secretary, are calling their governors and demanding that the state comply with NTIA's direction on specific price points for low-income and other broadband plans. You said to Senator Kennedy just last month that you're, quote, pretty hands-off on this, unquote. Congress never envisioned NTIA circumventing the explicit prohibition on rate regulation by implicitly conditioning NTI approval of these plans on such regulation. I'm very troubled by these developments, especially in light of your and Mr. Davidson's prior sworn testimony to this committee that the NTIA was not engaging in such pressure tactics, which are prohibited by the IIJA. So I'm going to ask you once again, will you assure me and this committee that you and your staff, number one, cease these pressure tactics, number two, approve state plans that do not set a specific price for low-cost broadband plan or for certain service tiers, such as symmetrical gigabyte service, and third and finally, you will reject state BEAD plans that propose to mandate such price regulations.
So I will again testify and promise to you we are not engaged in rate regulation. The statute is crystal clear. Every state must provide a low-cost option. I did not write the statute. I will implement the statute. The statute is crystal clear. That is referenced throughout the statute. By the way, you referenced Senator Kennedy. His plan has already been approved. Louisiana's been approved, no problem. I think we're up to almost 20 states have been approved. We are not slowing this down. We are not using, as you say, pressure tactics. But the truth of it is, as I have said numerous times today, the internet is not a luxury. It is a necessity. And every state is free to decide what is low cost. How much does it cost to, lay fiber over a mountain range or in a rural area? It'll cost more. I'm not going to tell them, $20 a month or you're not going to get your money. But I am going to hold their feet to the fire to make sure they follow the statute and have a low-cost plan.
Are you calling specific governors, asking them that their states comply with NTIA's direction on specific price points?
No, but I'm doing my job. A lot of these governors are dragging their feet, and I'm saying, we want to get this money out quickly. Please get us your proposal and work with us so that we can get the money out the door. I am not calling anyone and saying, you have to do this cost. What I am saying is...
There are no cost specifics that you're directing to any individual state regarding the implementation of the BEAD funds?
No.
Thank you. My state is one of those states. I represent South Central Pennsylvania with many hills and valleys, with many nooks and crannies, with many hills and hollers, which make the laying down of fiber impractical. We need an all-of-the-above approach to be able to successfully roll out this BEAD money, and the success of this program hangs in balance. And I am deeply concerned that the NTIA's heavy-handed rate regulation requirements, among others, will push this program towards failure, leaving the rural Americans that I represent in South Central and South Pennsylvania without that necessary broadband access, without that connectivity for the farmers, for the teachers, for the patients who need to connect with their doctors. I fear that the concerns of what we have discussed here today have not been adequately answered without that firm commitment that there will not be heavy-handedness directed towards those who are trying to comply, who are trying to utilize this BEAD money successfully in areas throughout America. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time has expired, and I yield back.
Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. I thank the Secretary for being here today. I think this has been a helpful hearing. I remind members that they have 10 business days to submit questions for the record, and I ask the witnesses to respond to the questions, and specifically the Secretary to respond to the questions promptly. Members should submit their questions by the close of business on July 10th. Without objection, the subcommittee is adjourned.
Thank you for your time.